The Soviet Communist Party votes overwhelmingly to abandon its monopoly on power. Good evening. Mr. Gorbachev wins his struggle behind closed doors at the Communist Party plenum in the Kremlin. With only one vote against, delegates agree to abandon Article 6 of the Soviet Constitution, which guarantees the party's hold on power. The single vote against belongs to Boris Yeltsin, who appears to be putting down a marker, indicating that his radical faction may want to go further. Tonight, we report what is yet another historic development in Moscow and analyse its implications for tomorrow's Soviet Union. The West German cabinet invites East Germany to start proceeding to a united German currency next week. At home, as the Met Office issues emergency storm warnings, scientists say the British climate really has changed. And the Commons Defence Committee says it will investigate the Wallace affair, but MPs say they still want a judicial inquiry. But first, after more than 70 years of absolute power, the Soviet Communist Party agrees to end its constitutional right to govern. The specially extended Central Committee meeting in Moscow accedes to President Gorbachev's proposals, which could eventually lead to a multi-party state. Only Boris Yeltsin votes against. He wanted faster reform. Although no final text has yet been published, the changes appear to be Article 6 of the Constitution, guaranteeing the leading role of the party, is to go. The Central Committee should be slimmed down. A new political executive committee will be formed to include representatives of all the republics of the Soviet Union. And the role of Party General Secretary, held by Mr. Gorbachev, to be changed to Party Chairman with increased powers. The reforms were approved after senior party figures warned that time was running out. The Foreign Minister, Edward Shevardnadze, said if we cannot consolidate healthy forces tomorrow, there may emerge chaos and anarchy. Our Moscow correspondent David Smith reports on the final day of this historic plenum.
Much as the Kremlin and those close to Mr. Gorbachev have been trying to present this plenum as a triumph, it's been too much of a battle for that. And tonight, after 3 days of fractious debate, it's far from clear where the country goes from this point on. At today's final sessions, Mr. Gorbachev's key allies dominated the debate. The message to Central Committee members from the likes of Foreign Minister Shevardnadze and Prime Minister Ryzhkov was blunt. The party had to accept that its days of absolute supremacy are over and compete for power. To many on the right, schooled in the ways of Stalin and Brezhnev, that's anathema. To the left, it's no guarantee that they will get power, even if they win it through the ballot box. After the vote on the party's new platform, his supporters were putting the best face on it. But Mr. Gorbachev may end up satisfying no one, except those who, like him, believe there is still a centre ground in Soviet politics.
Yes, I'm completely satisfied. Completely. I think this is a very nice, very big step.
Who won, the conservatives or the reformers?
No, reformers, of course. Yes, conservatives cannot win. It's unlogical how people can go back.
Any number of contradictions and questions arise from the past 72 hours. But the main one is whether the slogan of multi-party democracy will mean power sharing. Control of this society still rests with the party and the military. They will not step aside overnight. And at every centre of power, there's the nomenclatura, the vast apparatus of party bureaucrats who have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are. What Mr. Gorbachev is doing then may be understandable, but it smacks of policy being made on the spur of the nation's crisis and not thought through for that reason.
If you can't beat them, join them. So the idea is that our party, if it wants to retain its dominating role, if not leading role, must be open to free competition and to compete with other political forces for this place. So if you believe in the party, there's no problem.
What sort of multi-party democracy is this going to be? It's not at all clear at this stage.
Not only to you, and to me as well. It must be based on our constitution, but we have to rewrite our constitution.
But let's be specific. If the nationalists win in the Ukraine, for example, is the party going to move aside and let them take power in what is a crucial part of the country?
You see, it's rather difficult to imagine what will happen. We must understand that socialist ideas are alive in our people, and you can't reject the whole history of the Soviet Union. And you remember that Gorbachev stressed in his speech that our party and our leadership are devoted to the ideas of the Great October Socialist Revolution, to the ideas of Lenin.
Leninism, socialism, to radical opposition leaders like Boris Yeltsin, probably the single most popular politician here. This plenum is no major breakthrough. After drawing huge crowds in Moscow a few days ago, today Mr. Yeltsin showed his dismay by being the only member of the Central Committee to vote against Gorbachev's new charter.
Yeltsin wants to oppose, definitely, himself against Gorbachev. So he wants to become an alternative leader. And so that's why, that's for tactical as well as strategic reasons that he voted against the platform.
But isn't there a danger that what Mr. Gorbachev has done will simply not satisfy the Boris Yeltsins and the millions of people who support him?
Well, Yeltsin definitely represents a large number of people. If you remember the results of elections in Moscow, about 90% of Muscovites voted in favor of Yeltsin. So I think he represents, but probably he not so much represents the people, but he represents people who vote for him, but he represents the people who vote against the current economic situation, the current ethnic situation, all things bad that exist in the Soviet Union.
Tonight's last debate was on Lithuania, and Mr. Gorbachev's proposal that the Baltics and other republics be allowed to secede if they wish. Another crunch issue, and no doubt another argument. Whatever emerges in the final text, the party knows it cannot stop the independence movements.
A limited victory then, not a triumph for the president. Much as he's manoeuvred the Central Committee into concessions it didn't want to make now, the party will almost certainly be bitterly divided after this. And that can only improve the chances of the radicals when the many republics of the Soviet Union vote over the next few weeks. David Smith, ITN, Moscow.
Well, the Soviet Union's ideology chief, Vadim Medvedev, who arrived in Britain today, has warned that the party must consolidate healthy forces or face an uncontrolled deluge. But does his president still face opposition at the forthcoming party congress? Mr. Gorbachev has tended to occupy the middle ground between the two wings of the party, the radicals who want to move faster towards reform and the conservatives who oppose any change. Mr. Gorbachev has avoided joining either camp. On the leading role of the party, he's angered the conservatives by ending the party's monopoly of power. But as far as the radicals are concerned, he hasn't promised that new parties can form. On the breakaway, he's promised the Lithuanian party a high degree of independence, but he has stopped short of giving them the right to secede. Similarly, on the ownership of the means of production, he's promised a new law, but it still hasn't been decided whether that includes private ownership. And on economic reforms, he's allowed private cooperatives to develop, but central planning still dominates the ailing system. So can Mr. Gorbachev, firmly in the middle, get today's reforms through the party congress? Crucial will be the effect of his shake-up on the way delegates are chosen. At the moment, ordinary party members in the workplaces are far removed from power. They appoint delegates to the rural and city conferences. They in turn appoint the regional and republic conferences. Only then are delegates to the party congress selected. But at a stroke, Mr. Gorbachev plans to sweep away most of that structure, to introduce secret and direct elections to the party congress. For the first time, there'll be no weeding out process. The grassroots will be elected directly to the top. Today, straight from the plenum, Politburo member Vadim Medvedev met Mrs. Thatcher at number 10. He had no doubts that Mr. Gorbachev could steer his measures through.
And the result of the vote, the fact that it has been almost unanimous, testifies, I think, to the fact that the party and its leading body, the Central Committee, are full of vigor and want to promote perestroika and deepen it.
Now we're joined again by the academic and writer on Soviet affairs, Peter Frank. Peter, you've been monitoring the way in which the Soviet people have been told about this on Soviet television literally just now, and I gather in the course of the same bulletin there was an example of precisely what the Central Committee seems to have been talking about today.
Absolutely. We can see very clearly what it was that prompted Gorbachev to make such a radical shift in deciding to go for democratization rather than this gradual compromise approach. Because what's happened down in Volgograd we knew about 10 days ago when they tipped out the party first secretary there because of his behavior. But that hasn't satisfied the people. They've taken things further and they've kicked out the present replacement for the original man, and they're calling for all power to the Soviet. This is not a consequence of what Gorbachev said at the plenum. It's something, I think, which was building up and which forced him and forced his hand.
Well, there indeed we were looking at Volgograd pictures, but on the wider scene, back in the Kremlin itself, are we now then going to see a completely different constitution in terms of the membership of the Central Committee? Will those people in Volgograd actually get to nominate who goes in there?
Well, it's quite remarkable because although there's this business of taking away the party conferences, which we've just seen on screen, there's also a quite dramatic suggestion that there should be the party congress first, and constitutionally that's normally where the Central Committee is elected, but already party members are saying that that Central Committee should be elected after the Congress. This is absolutely standing things on its head, and it's so that the grassroots can see how their representatives perform. If they don't like it, they can put somebody else in its place.
So that even before we get to any question of competition to the Communist Party, we're talking about a possibility that by the end of this year or next year, we could have completely different faces on all these crucial bodies like the Central Committee.
Yes, it's quite conceivable, and I think it's most likely that we'll have a very, very different Central Committee. But the fact that we've heard tonight that there have been no major changes in the composition of the Politburo suggests to me that Gorbachev has had to give some ground to the Conservative opposition. And I think that this is going to anger a lot of people and going to produce a lot of demands for change.
Yes, we've heard of the vote by Boris Yeltsin and the suggestion that this thing isn't radical enough, that he wanted it to go much further. How representative do you think that call is, and what further did he want?
I think that Yeltsin is absolutely right in that he's reflecting a very widespread popular view. I think there's going to be an attempt to depict it as him wanting to be some kind of alternative to Gorbachev, which he may well want to be, but at the same time he is truly reflecting the views of a large number of people, and it's quite possible that the circumstances could arise when he might contest Gorbachev either for the party leadership or indeed for the presidency.
Two other areas briefly. Lithuania, which clearly extended proceedings towards the end. What did they resolve?
Well, it's a fudge. It's yet another fudge, because what happened in the Lithuanian case after the December Congress there in Lithuania was that you had the majority of the Lithuanian party forming an independent party and a kind of rump party of traditional communists. Now, what the plenum has decided to do is to recognise the rump, but not the bulk of the Communist Party.
The other crucial question, personnel on the Politburo. We thought Ligachev was under pressure, might go. Nobody seems to have gone.
Nobody seems to have gone, and we'll have to wait and see whether some people at a lower level have been forced to retire. If, for example, the former party first secretary from Volgograd is still there in the Central Committee, goodness knows what the people of Volgograd will think.
In a word, could it happen in the next plenum in 3.5 weeks' time?
Oh, I think at the next plenum it could happen. If it doesn't, then Gorbachev is labelled with a Conservative Politburo.
Peter Frank, thank you very much for joining us.